Hi everybody, Scott here. In this video we're going to talk about INFJ loneliness and how we can address it. How can essentially we heal that loneliness? And I use the word heal deliberately because we can all be lonely. We can all get lonely at times. It's just part of being human for anybody. But for INFJs, there can be you could almost call it like a soul loneliness is one way to describe it. It's more than just a moment. It's almost like, or it can be like a state of being. And this video is going to look at why that is, where it comes from, where it can come from, and what we can do about it. So I've talked about one of the reasons why INFJs can feel disconnected from others in other videos, but I'm going to look at it again just briefly in this video. So one of the ways I've talked about the INFJ is using their NI function is that, in a sense, INFJs live from a different frequency. It's just a different space that the INFJ occupies, and it's essentially just very different to everybody, most other people. And so the way I sort of describe it is that a lot of people, whether they're sensors or sensor intuitive is the main difference, but for the INFJ, those two main functions, NI and FE, it's like it occupies this space here. So the here to here is NI, FE, INFJ. Others occupy this space here. And I use the word others broadly. There's always going to be exceptions, but for the most part, this is how it looks for people. So for the INFJ, they're occupying all of that there, while others occupy this space here, and there's just this small space of commonality. And essentially what I'm saying is the INFJ only gets to connect with most other people from this really narrow bandwidth of connection. The INFJ can also, because of their cognitive function, they can understand this whole area of the other space that people occupy and live from. They can understand it all. They can see it and understand it. However, the INFJ only lives a portion of themselves lives in the similar area as other people. So that's where INFJs can connect with others and where others can connect with INFJs. So there's this whole other area here that most other people don't understand. So the INFJ can understand and even occupy this space with others, whereas most other people can't see or understand or are even interested to engage in this area here. So this essentially is why the INFJ can carry a loneliness, but it's not a momentary place. It is often a consistent place. That doesn't mean that the INFJ is doomed to a life of loneliness, but it helps to explain where this kind of soul loneliness comes from, and that it's almost like a low-level current that the INFJ can experience most of the time, at least until the INFJ recognizes it, sees it, feels it, and starts to address it, which is what we're going to talk about next. So there's essentially two areas that I want to cover. There's two different types of INFJs that I want to cover in this video. One of them is the INFJ that grows up in a fairly healthy environment, but is still an INFJ in the world, and so still can experience some of this, but not to the extent of the second group, which is the INFJ that grows up in a somewhat dysfunctional environment, where not only were their NI not met, but also the other areas of nurture weren't met. You know, physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, just a general loving environment. Now, we're all on sort of a bell-shaped curve when it comes to this. Some people can grow up in incredibly healthy, vibrant homes. Some people can grow up in very terrible homes. This video is kind of talking about, wants to sort of address both types, essentially. So like I was saying earlier, one of the challenges that INFJs can have is that they're able to connect with other people in this top band here. They're able to understand, connect, focus in, connect with others, but they're not able to often receive that reciprocal connection. Now that can be an ongoing problem as well. That can cause like a sense of dissatisfaction in life, and not having that need to be known reciprocated by other people. That's not a 100% golden rule. There are other people of all different types that can connect to an INFJ if they choose to, if they spend the time, if they've got an interest, or they make an effort to go, okay, you think about the world differently, you see the world differently, you communicate about the world differently, and I want to get to know that difference. If an INFJ comes across someone like that, it's going to be like bees to honey in a sense, because it's something that's so often so rare for the INFJ. I've been pretty lucky in my own journey when I think back to probably early teenage years, where I've essentially always had a couple of people that I can communicate naturally who I am, and it be received and understood and valued. But not everybody gets that opportunity. So when an INFJ comes across that, it's a very valuable connection. So some of the results of growing up being misunderstood, lack of connection, learning how to connect with others and connect in with others but not have it returned, is the INFJ could come to a place of kind of unconsciously, if you like, giving up on trying to be understood or trying to get connection, and can kind of become a bit of a wallflower in the sense of waiting to be connected to. That could be the first group that I was referring to earlier, that there can just be this general waiting for others to notice the difference, the difference that the INFJ carries. The second type of INFJ, where they've come from a more problematic childhood, where it's just a little more than just a lack of NI interaction, let's say, is there can be some real deep unmet needs for attention and connection, nurture and things like that. Now, for both types, it could lead to something like this, where the INFJ is essentially disconnected within themselves. So it might not feel like that, because often the INFJ is focusing in and understanding others, meeting other people's needs, and that they can do that in a very holistic way. You know, they can see others very holistically and get that feedback from the other person that they're being met very holistically, and that can feel holistic for the INFJ. And it can be misinterpreted from the INFJ as that they are holistic. But it's really, in a sense, a byproduct of the feedback from others. So it's a feedback from the INFJ being holistic, or helping someone to see themselves holistically, get that feedback. And that can feel like I'm whole and I'm all connected. And I think there's two pieces of that. On one hand, yes, that's true. For an INFJ, when they're doing that, they are really living from a pretty key part of who they are as an INFJ, NI and FE, channeling their energy towards others and going into their world and helping to understand their world. That can be a form, if you like, of self-actualization. The more the INFJ is extroverting, if you like, their intuition through their feeling into the world and making positive changes in the lives of others, is part of what an INFJ can do very well and actually can lead to a good sense of connectedness within. But an INFJ could be doing that, but actually be disconnected from themselves or their deeper selves. But it can't be seen, at least initially, because the energy is always often focused outwardly. And so where it can get very problematic, that sort of natural ability can become problematic, is when that action, if you like, is being used to medicate or to make up for the disconnection within the self, the lack of understanding internally, the lack of like the lack of connectedness within the self. Now that could almost seem, I was going to say like offensive or something like that, but it could just come as a shock or as come with resistance from an INFJ to hear that because of the very dynamic that I've just described. But for some INFJs, this could certainly be a problem. So there's a general rule that when we are doing something externally to meet an unmet internal need, it never satisfies. So that can apply to all types in all ways, in all sorts of ways. So the not the INFJ, but anybody doing things, behaviors, doing actions to get positive feedback, getting positive words back. We could all do that to a certain extent, but that can become like a main way that people function, because that positive reinforcement actually medicates and tries to meet an internal need that is saying underneath the surface that I'm not good enough, that I need other people's approval to know that I'm okay. But that external source never satisfies. And so more and more of that behavior needs to occur in order to continually get the positive feedback. In the INFJ's case, they could essentially burn out in a lot of ways by giving out more and more and more to other people to get that holistic feeling back from them. So they're experiencing holistic self-understanding and knowing, and that feels like the INFJ is having it for themselves, but it's not the case. Although it's, like I said, it's part of what an INFJ can do, but when it's being used to deal with a disconnect inside, it won't ever create a connection. In a sense, the INFJ needs to deal with their own disconnection within themselves. And often it's the pain of life, it's the pain of broken relationships and things like that lead an INFJ to recognize that there's something wrong in themselves that they need to address. So essentially, the INFJ is no different to all the other types in the sense that when we're growing up as children, we need the external environment, i.e. our caregivers, our parents, to help us to shape our identity. So we need that positive nurture. We need good words of affirmation. We need quality time. We need to be told that we have value and that we're valuable, and actually hear it in a language that we understand. That's a part of all of us. It needs to come from externally, from an external source. But the way I like to say it is that as children, the truth is that we already are valuable and all of that. And when we're hearing it from the outside, that truth that we carry is then reinforced from the external environment, from a caregiver, from a kind word, from these sorts of things. It reinforces that truth. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, that truth gets wounded, and there's a lot of negative feedback. There can be a lot of rejection and things like that turn that truth into a faulty belief, which is that we don't have value. So there seems to be a switch essentially from childhood or adolescence to adulthood, where we can no longer really get it externally. Once we kind of move into our adult phase of life, that level of reinforcement from the external world can do a certain amount of nurturing the self, if you like, or healing some woundings, but it could easily become a trap of then looking for it externally to meet the unmet need of childhood. So it's like there's a switch that once we move into adulthood, that the power of the external feedback is nowhere near as powerful, and that it moves from the need, if you like, for the shaping of identity, moves from the external sources to, I now need to do it for myself. I now need to, in a sense, like reparent myself. Or another way of saying it is become my own best friend, which is, again, trying to feed back into this issue of loneliness. The more that an INFJ is extroverting themselves to make everybody else feel awesome, to try and make themselves feel awesome, it will only do a fraction of what it needs to do. So there needs to be that point of, okay, now I need to take care of my own need for connection internally. And so it becomes not a relationship with others problem for the most part, although that could be true. It becomes a relationship with self problem. And the INFJ needs to go on that journey of looking after themselves, looking after their heart, looking after their intuition, and so on. So the answer is to become connected to self and dealing with whatever is there. And I've addressed videos that essentially say to the INFJ, go on that journey to figure out what is unmet internally, what are the issues internally, and look to address them. Put some of that energy, some of that energy that goes to meeting other people's needs, to yourself, and looking at the self and valuing the self, not externally, that might be confusing, but independent of what's going on out there in the sensory world. So it can be done as a combination of individual reparenting or becoming one's own best friend, taking care of the self deliberately, but it also can be an external thing through relationship. When it's only trying to be met through relationship, it falls down. And when it's only being met through just individual looking after the self, it also falls down. There needs to be kind of a balance, basically. And the way I would say it, though, is that to the level that an INFJ starts to take care and, in a sense, nurture themselves, take care of themselves, become their own best friend, valuing what they have to offer and enjoying, in a sense, their own company, and in a sense, reconciling any pain parts that they carry, reconciling them to the self, to the level that takes place is to the level that relationship can take place as well in the external. Sometimes it starts with a positive relationship that can help generate and start that, and then that gets started, and then the INFJ needs to take care of that for themselves, and then that can feed back into positive relationship with other people, and then that's sort of like a positive feedback loop, if you like. Can't be one or the other. It needs to be a combination of both. So I've done some videos on how to connect in with the self. And I'll put some links in the descriptions and on the top of the video up here to go to those videos. But essentially, it's about accepting what is happening on the inside, or what is going on there, or at least being, or I should say, being open to what is there, and being curious to what's there. So, without going into it in fine detail in this video, I'll leave a link. Like I said, we can carry unresolved emotions, we can carry unresolved memories, hurts, all sorts of different things that kind of take place, or we carry them in ourselves, often hidden from ourselves. And so there's a simple process to help address and connect to those parts, and it's called NAW, N-A-W. So notice, acknowledge, welcome. So notice a feeling, notice a discomfort, notice a pain, and then acknowledge it. Yes, this is what's happening for me. Sometimes we can feel it or sense it in our body, and we sort of pay attention to where that's happening in our body. And then we welcome it. We essentially go, I'm going to let myself have the feeling, instead of maybe doing something external in the external environment to cope with or to avoid the discomfort that I carry. And there's a fourth one I like to add to that, which is S, for sharing. Tying back into that, both doing internal work, individual work, and relationship work, is sometimes it can be helpful for anybody, but this video is for INFJs, to share what's going on for them with other people or with someone they trust. So it's notice, acknowledge, welcome, share. And the share is optional. Sometimes we don't have someone that we're comfortable to share it with, or it's just not appropriate, or it's just not required, but it could be a good option as that sharing option, to get some air on it, share it, talk about it, process it. One other thing to address this sort of theme of loneliness is, on one hand, the INFJ, for the most part, will always be able to connect with others better than others are able to connect to them, at least from a personality type, cognitive functions perspective. Again, not 100% rule, but for the most part that would be true. And what I want to say though to that, because if that was just a full stop statement there, that's not very satisfying for an INFJ. The reality is that there are forms or levels of connection with other people that go way beyond personality type. I guess, to say it simply, there could just be like a loving relationship, or in a marriage, where there is something deeper than personality type that has brought a couple together. Now, it could be that there are similar woundings that happened in childhood that has led to the two people becoming advocates. No, that's not the right word, but becoming safe places for both to talk about and to heal those wounds. Now, that's not the end of the relationship. It is just a way that two people can connect with one another. There could be sort of a familiar feeling that's there, and that brings them together, and they can start talking about parts of their journey that lead to healing. And I guess there's just can be a spiritual component that can bring people together on a much deeper level. And sure, there will be that awareness of the personality type on the surface that can be a challenge to overcome. But with the awareness that there's actually something stronger that could be knitting two people together, and then focusing in on that can bring a depth of meaning that can certainly overcompensate, that's not the right word, but can overshadow, if you like, some of the personality type disconnects that can happen in relationship. Another area of focus can be the journey for an INFJ from not knowing they're an INFJ to discovering that they're an INFJ to getting that validation and affirmation from others that really are communicating who they are and identifying with them, and that's a necessary part of growth and development, but they're not getting stuck with that label, if you like, and getting lost in it and moving beyond it. And in a sense, the thing I was saying just before around that deeper connection between two people is one way of moving beyond personality type, because we can get very rigid and locked in to the 4 letters and all of that, which in a sense can be an isolating thing to do. So I often try to help INFJs to both be validated with their type, but then moving beyond it, moving, sort of actualizing past it. That's not to reject it, but there's more. There's more to the journey than just the identifying with the INFJ traits, because that could actually become an isolating factor if treated in a certain way. So we want to move beyond that, and a lot of the videos that I've made sort of try to promote that essentially. There are other videos, of course, that also just focus in on affirming the INFJ, because we need it. We need it often because we don't get it from the external world. Now, it kind of ties back into what I was saying at the start of the video, that we don't want to just get in the trap of always wanting to be affirmed, looking from it externally, watching, just using YouTube videos about the affirmation of the INFJ to deal with an unmet need to be known on the inside. They can be a helpful tool and something that can be worthwhile coming back to when needed. And for some people that could be more often than others. But seeing that actually I may need to do some of that for myself. I may need to be affirming myself, valuing myself, rather than looking from it externally from others to do the valuing. Again, it's that relationship between the two. Now, a lot of INFJs can can do what I was saying earlier, which was extrovert themselves to other people to help others get to know themselves better, and that doing it in that holistic way, and then getting that feedback that helps to sort of nurture the INFJ. And that can be happening at any stage of an INFJ's journey, way before they've found out about the INFJ traits and things like that. In fact, often when INFJs discover that they're INFJs and look into it, a lot of what happens is it helps to explain what they've been doing their whole lives. Oh, that's why people come to me all the time and talk to me about their stuff, or that's why I get these random thoughts and so on. And so the identifying of the INFJ and the INFJ traits can help bring a greater awareness of them, as opposed to them kind of happening almost unconsciously. It's like, oh, that's what that is. And those skills and abilities can be enhanced through conscious awareness of them. So, part of the INFJ's growth, with what I've already talked about, is essentially about how to deal with the loneliness. Now, it's not a complete picture, but it's certainly, I think, a good introduction to how an INFJ can start to address their loneliness, or why they're feeling lonely a lot of the time. But through that process of getting to know the self, reconciling with maybe hurt, broken parts internally, building that relationship with self, can then lead to an even greater ability to be there for others and put their gift out into the world. And so with the conscious awareness of that ability, good boundaries can be put around it, especially around trying to do that to deal with an unmet need. Once that is identified and reversed, then the INFJ who is then centered in themselves and best friends with themselves, have reparented those broken parts, can then put their gifting out in the world without the need necessarily for all of the feedback. It can just be that holistic feeling of just knowing that they're living from a truer place in self and are putting themselves out into the world in a way that is benefiting other people. Now that can go into a whole range of different things depending on what a person does and where a person's at and so on. But finding ways to do that is part of the INFJ, sort of self-actualization, is turning that reconciled relationship with self into helping others to reconcile things in themselves and in the other areas of their lives. Now that could happen in a very deliberate way. Like people could find careers that just focus in on that. An obvious example is counselling or some form of helping profession, but it can happen very informally as well, through friendships, through just the chance encounters that people have. It's like once we start to figure some stuff out about ourselves, we start to heal and we start to grow. It's amazing how people, we find ourselves in conversations and interactions with people that wouldn't have happened without that work, that personal work having happened. And that can lead to a greater sense of purpose in life, where it's almost like spiritual kind of encounters, chance encounters, of engaging with people and talking about issues of life that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And because that relationship with self has been restored, then the feedback that the INFJ can get from other people about how well they've felt taken care of, or understood, or offered some feedback. The INFJ's offered feedback that really hits the nail on the head for the other person. That feedback then becomes a reinforcer, in the sense of, I'm living out of a truer place of self. I'm content with who I am, and man, it is nice to get some of that, a confirmation of who the INFJ is, instead of it being used to meet an unmet need inside the INFJ. It's like, yes, I know who I am, it's really nice to get feedback of who I am. So when they're like, you've really helped me to connect to myself, that information coming from the other, it speaks to the connectedness that the INFJ has with themselves, instead of it being a feedback to meet a disconnect within the self. So anyway, I think I'll leave the video there. I hope you've found this video valuable and helpful, and I'll look forward to seeing you in another video.